Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I'm Media Post Event Editorial Manager, and you are watching Insider Summit BTS. And it's where we get to sort of see behind the curtains these amazing, influential marketing women and find out what got them started. And who we have with us today is Pearl Servat. And she is the head of brand marketing at Visible Wireless, which is a D2C brand of Verizon. They're owned by Verizon, right? And you guys are the very first all digital wireless carrier. So that's pretty exciting. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation, Lisa.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we've talked, obviously, you've been a part of our summits, and which is great. I mean, I love that, but I love, like, just as I start researching and finding out more about you and being able to get the opportunity to, talk this way is really important to me. And one thing I do want to say, well, I mean, just talking about Visible, I mean, you guys are pretty young, 2 years, and you are like going like gangbusters. Fast Company with what you were most on the list of most innovative companies. Also, let me read this, awarded the Shorty Award for Best Immersive in Social Media. And you also named the Top Challenger Brand by Adweek. So what I want to know is, what does Challenger mean to you when it comes to that? And it's not just, it can be about in terms of you as a brand, but just that word. Does it make you sort of think, oh my gosh, I have to compare myself to all the competition, or does it more give you sort of that freedom to kind of sort of set your own path?
I think being a challenger brand is about setting your own path. And the company, actually, we just had our third birthday. And, it's really about, we always say we're our own biggest competitor. And we're really defining a new path in telecommunications and wireless. We're the first all digital carrier in the US within a D2C model, like you said. And the brand was really created to simplify the consumer experience in wireless. And we're simple, we're accessible, we're inclusive, we're highly steadfast and focused on the notion of the community. And when it comes to that community component and setting ourselves apart, it's truly integrated in every aspect of the business, from our product output and the way that we're developing and releasing the products and what they actually are, to our marketing strategies and brand positioning and the way that we connect with our members, which we call our members, our consumers, our members, and also our various partners that we work with. So it's really about being thoughtful about how you're sort of shaping your position within not just the industry that we're in, but e-commerce as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and I do think that being a challenger, it does give you, it's kind of like you can kind of do what you need to do to get in, as a person, as a business, whatever it may be. It sort of puts you in a nice position, I think. And
Yes.
now I want to ask a little bit about, I know that you are originally from Toronto, and
Yes.
talk about first of all, when did you move to the United States?
Sure. So I moved, I was born and raised in Iran, and I moved there in 93, 94. And I initially moved to London and lived there for about a year and a half. And then I came to the US and hopped around a little bit, lived in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Utah. And, for Visible, I moved to Denver, and now I live in Philadelphia. So, but yeah, I think a lot of the elements of being born in Iran and then moving here have really, and also traveling a lot over the years, has really helped to shape my perspective when it comes to being adaptable, when it comes to sort of, change for me is really normal, because, I grew up in one place and again, moved around a lot. So, and I think being at Visible, and changing industries from entertainment to telco, and being at Visible, where we really built the company from the ground up, really from day one. It's my personal experience. I've been able to sort of bring it to the table with me, and for me, it's really pivots and changes and things like that are pretty. I'm used to them because of my upbringing.
Well, and it also must make you, especially even as a marketer, but in general, relate to so many different people, just because you've worked and you've lived, excuse me, in so many different cultures, not only just different countries, but also even different areas of the United States, where that can be a big difference as well. So that must really help to, as you said, it sort of shapes that you can, be used to change, but also it must shape the way you work with people and work as a marketer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's not just, for me personally, it wasn't just about living in these different places. In my previous role, I also traveled extensively, both domestically and internationally, and you gain a lot of perspective about consumer behaviors, cultural behaviors, why people make the decisions that they do, why do they think a certain way. And I remember, when I used to work in the entertainment industry, we used to break talent who were crossing over to the US, but then we also used to break talent going from the US to other territories. And you had to treat each culture and country and territory from a really, really unique standpoint. Because again, it goes back to sort of like the psychology of how you behave and consume information and your sort of purchasing behaviors and things like that that are all impacted by your culture or where you're from. So gaining that experience for me, it was, and it still is today, absolutely immeasurable, where I look at consumer behavior and again, why we have to show up as a brand the way that we do for consumers to really, really respond to that. Because, when it comes to something like a wireless plan, your phone plan, it's a very personal decision, right? Because you want to have a super seamless, a super frictionless experience. So for me and our team here at Visible, I think we spend 99% of our time really, really paying attention to what is that end-to-end experience. It doesn't just stop and start with product or marketing. All of these different pieces have to be really, really unified and work well together in order for the consumer to respond to what you're offering to them.
Yeah, no, and it really, I can see as a marketer, I mean, but even as a person, just in terms of relating to different people, it must be such an asset that you have had all those experiences. I
Yeah.
want to sort of go back in terms of starting out. You mentioned, that you had been in entertainment, but talk about, sort of that onset of beginning your marketing career and like go before that, obviously, like what was your ambition? What was your goal, I guess, when you were initially starting out? And then how did that evolve to, here we are at Visible?
Absolutely. So, I spent the larger part of my career, as you know, in the entertainment industry, working with TV, film, and music talent, but also a lot of clients who had personal brand equity. So I worked at the intersection of brands and talent and helped to build, personal brands from the ground up, facilitated a lot of brand partnerships, did a lot of endorsement deals and things like that. But initially, I was really inspired by the person who ended up becoming my boss, and she's still a mentor to this day, Pat Kingsley, who was and is an icon in the entertainment industry. She was the founder of PMKBNC, and I had heard about her. I always say ignorance is bliss in many ways. I wanted to get connected with her and ended up working with her. I started at the company as an intern and sort of worked my way up, over the course of 10 plus years. And she was a hugely prominent influence in my life. And, she obviously changed my life by giving me a chance to work for her. But her thought leadership was really, really valuable to me. She was someone who, was very decisive, very tough, but also direct. You always knew what you were getting out of her. She was an absolute visionary. So having someone like that as a teacher and mentor for me was incredibly valuable. And a lot of the takeaways that I sort of took with me when I left PMK, I still apply them to everything that I do. And I still am huge on mentorship. So I still lean on her heavily, whether it's something that I want to sort of think and talk through from a personal standpoint. If it's, work related, I still use her as a sounding board. So, while I was working in entertainment, I always joke and say everyone thought I would be a lifer. And from PMK, I went to Philly Mac, which is a Live Nation and Rock Nation company with a very interesting hybrid model. Is part talent management, part production company. So they have deals with Netflix and Amazon and YouTube, and then part, they also have an investment portfolio. So while I was at Philly Mac, it sort of was an introduction for me to have one foot in the entertainment world and then one foot in sort of like the entrepreneurial startup world, environment. And that again really allowed me to extend beyond myself and diversify my thinking and my perspective and the way that I connected with people. And I always say your network is everything. So it really allowed me to extend my relationships and expand my network But really it was truly the beginning of the moment that I started to become really curious about, okay, what else is outside of the entertainment world. And the way that I ended up at Visible was that I've known our CMO Minjay Arms for probably over 10 years at this point. We've done a lot of work together over the years, and she'd reached out to me and said, hey, I'm going to a Verizon company. It's a bit of a secret project, and it's something, it's a company that we're building from the ground up. Would you be interested in going with me? And I want, I always give the advice, you have to bet on yourself and you have to take risks that feel right for you. So I decided to leave LA and one day just leave the entertainment industry, and I moved to Denver to join Visible, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and I think, and I love that you are ready to sort of take those leaps. And I think when you get an opportunity, it's scary, but at the same point, if you don't do it, then you might be looking back and saying, okay, now what could I have done? When you
Yeah.
talk about that starting off with Pat Kingsley and
Mhm.
the mentorship, and what do you like? There was obviously so much value there. What were the key things that made you? Why do you think you were allowed to excel because of how she was able to deal with handle you, deal with you, however you want to? What did she give to you that allowed you to sort of find your way and really succeed? That then maybe now you can give to those people coming up under you.
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that she did, not just for me, but for a lot of other women who worked for her, who've become trailblazers in their own right, she created a safe space for all of us. And a foundation of trust was always there. And I used to always say that Pat used to be ahead of us, removing the barriers and removing the blockers in order for us who are sort of following behind her to shine. And she really, really empowered us. So, some of the earliest clients that I worked with were people that Pat had signed, and she handed them over to me, and a lot of the other women who worked under her. So she really was a champion of our growth and ensuring that we were intentional about our approach, that we were, being self-sufficient was incredibly important to her, being doers, being someone who would take the initiative to do something and create success and create true value. Those were all the things that were really important to her that, I've taken with me over these years. But I think there's nothing like having a powerhouse of a mentor and a boss like that. And I find a lot of similarities between her and our current CEO at Visible, Angie Klein. She's also someone who is very present, very engaged, leads with a lot of intention. She's defined in her approach, is very decisive, has a clear vision. And I think those are all the elements that make you sort of want to challenge yourself even more and set a higher bar for yourself, right? Because you feel truly empowered in doing so. So those were some of the biggest things that, especially working with Pat Kingsley, have always stayed with me also.
Yeah, I think, and it's important even what you said, that they're not easy bosses per se, in the sense that they have very strong visions. They know what they want to do. I mean, I had a boss similar who, it was a man, but he was very much, it was his company. He wanted things a certain way, but he allowed me things that I wanted to try, I would do. And then he would he would, if it worked, if I did it well, then go with it. And he gave me those opportunities. And I think that's really important when you do have someone working on you, to let them do, but at the same point, be there as a guide, because, obviously your knowledge is important and is valuable to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Be there to support, challenge, encourage, ask questions, make them feel like you're invested in the work. I don't think there's anything more important than that.
No, I agree. Now,
Yeah.
what I think is so awesome is you are now back getting your MBA, right?
I am.
Did you get it yet, or you're still getting it, right? You're still doing
I'm
it?
still getting it. I'm getting my MBA from UNC Chapel Hill. The business school is Keenan Flagler, and I finished the program in December. It was for me, going back to school was another moment of wanting to push and challenge myself and extend beyond myself. I was hugely, hugely inspired for that decision by my colleagues at Visible. I was walking into a completely different world, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by all these folks who were either getting their MBAs or had their master's degrees. So that was a really, I really latched onto that and was really inspired by it. So I decided to go back to school. And, it's just like entering a new industry or starting a new career or a job. You have that initial very, very steep learning curve and a moment of, what did I do and why did I do this? But now looking back, I always say it's one of the very top best decisions that I've made for myself.
Well, I do like the reason I'm saying it, I think it's so great is you're in a position where, when someone graduates from college, I want to be you, like they want to get to where you're at. And I think it's something also, and I don't know, you may not have felt the same way, but I know when I graduated, I was like, I couldn't wait to get out into the real world. I was done with school. Whereas I think as we get out into like the industry, you learn that, okay, to really excel, in what you're doing, you need to then continue learning. I think we were more open to learning as we started experiencing life, sort of that balancing of the two.
Yes. I think for me, it all goes back to learning. I'm an always on sort of learner. I can never absorb enough information. I'm very inquisitive. I ask 1,000,001 questions, and going back to school was truly about that. I wanted to strengthen my skills in things like data analysis and the quant classes that are offered and those courses that are core. And then another thing that's been really valuable for me are things like leadership frameworks and operational frameworks. And you really, really get to dig into how some of the other companies and brands and leaders that we all admire, how their sort of minds work and why they make the decisions that they make. So and I cannot recommend this enough. So much of what I've learned through this program, I've been able to either apply it to my day-to-day life or everything that I do at work. I think it's allowed me in many ways to understand, to have a closer communication and connection style with my colleagues, to understand our ways of working a little bit more. You have to remember, I went from the entertainment industry, which isn't sort of like, there's a lot of structure and a lot of processes and things like that, but it's a totally different beast, right? So then walking into the environment that I did, going back to school has allowed me to have a much deeper understanding of, how to make certain decisions, how they're made, how teams work together, how you can build really, really effective cultures. So I could go on and on. As you can tell, I can't recommend it enough if you're able to and if you're interested in it.
No, I love that. You can see when you beam when you talk about
I light up, yeah.
That's awesome. Now I don't want you beaming anymore. I want to hear about something bad, but no, I want to hear, was there a time in your life that maybe something happened that seemed horrible, seemed like, okay, that's the worst thing that could ever happen, but it ultimately turned into something really good? When it's sort of that when you look back on things, is there something that happened that you can think of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think switching careers and industries was one of those things where at the beginning it felt and was very daunting, just, simply because it's a very humbling experience. You leave a very long-term career in one industry where you have all sorts of connections, a great network that you've built for yourself over the course of years. You know a lot, right? So you're able to sort of champion the younger generation along the way, and then leaving all of that and going into a new industry where I didn't know a single person. I didn't even speak the language of the industry. It was really, and I left my home. It was really daunting for me. And in the beginning, not only did I doubt myself, a lot of the people that I trusted were also telling me that this wasn't a good decision, that I shouldn't do it. A lot of people were like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And once I got over that very, very steep learning curve, I realized that, again, it was one of the best decisions I had made, because it really allowed me to once again extend beyond myself and learn and sharpen my skills and diversify my skills. And I think one thing that you learn along the way is how transferable skills are. And also, I had a bit of an aha moment a couple of years ago where it was like, okay, before I was working with talent and brands, and now I'm in-house working with this one brand. And the common thread between these two experiences is that when you have a good product that consumers want and need and care about, it almost doesn't matter what it is when you put the hard work and grit and resilience behind it, right? To sort of build from there. So that was a bit of an aha moment for me. And then another thing that I think allowed me to get through that moment in time was my internal network at Visible. They gave me a lot of grace and patience, and they sort of wrapped their arms around me while I was going through this learning process of understanding the industry. I remember in the early days, I used to sit sort of for hours next to our head of strategy and his team and ask them all sorts of questions, and they were really, really patient with me. And I think it's because we have a culture of truly believing into the people that we bring into the fold, into the family at Visible, and really supporting one another. I don't think there is a single day that I've had where I've reached out to a colleague or they've reached out to me. We support one another. Building a company from the ground up is no easy task, as you know. So you really have to have that support. So I would say that was one of my most challenging, but ultimately rewarding experiences.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on it. It's so key that people need to start looking at people more as skill sets and things.
Yes.
Not everything is going to be exactly okay. Someone who has done A, B, C, and D can now work here. You know what I mean?
Yes.
They transfer, and as you were realizing, you can learn. The
Yes.
technology. That those are things that you can learn. That's not where
Yeah.
you're going to really excel. Where you're going to
Yes.
excel is what's that innate, what you've been doing for your career. I
Yes.
think that's
Yeah.
a lot of industries need to like pick up just I see people running into like getting so many walls put up, and they're saying I know I can do this, but because I didn't do whatever, and
Yeah.
it's definitely something that people need to sort of open their minds on.
I
So
agree.
well, I mean, I want to sort of turn the subject a little bit to which everyone, you can't really talk about this past year, especially what we've all been going through, not just, I mean, obviously with the pandemic, but just with everything that's going on with racial injustice and just, everyone now, people, consumers, marketers, everyone, and they should be, it's all about diversity and inclusivity and just making sure that's happening. And as a brand, that is so important. And I know
Mhm.
that Visible, that's something that's part of your DNA. That's what you guys have been doing. Talk about that though, as a marketer, you obviously do that at Visible, so it's obviously important to you. But do you think it is a responsibility, since marketers have so much power in a lot of ways? They're so visible that
Yeah.
is there a responsibility there to make sure you do, be more inclusive, be, more mindful of these things?
Yeah, I don't think it's sort of like has to be the responsibility. I think it truly has to be a part of your DNA and who you are. I always sort of reflect on my colleagues at Visible and the types of people who sort of make up the DNA of this company, who they are and what they're passionate in and what they're invested in, and then the output of that, which is a lot of the impact work that we do. And when I was talking to you earlier about this the community sort of notion that Visible is centralized on, and how it extends to every single piece of the business, from product to social impact to marketing to content, all of the above, it's really speaks volumes to the types of colleagues that I have and to who works at Visible, and again, what drives them. And for us, when it comes to impact, we created an accelerator program that supported nonprofit startups before we ever launched a product with Visible, the wireless carrier, right? Because that's what the team here really, really believed in and wanted to build the foundation of the business on. And then since then, I mean, for us, inclusivity and impact and accessibility, all of those things, are 100% a part of who we are. I mean, we don't even think twice about these things because there's sort of an always on approach and thinking for us. So that mindset gets extended into how we bring our creative strategies to life, how we bring our content to life, experiential activation, social impact initiatives. So it really extends itself to all of those things. And I think, when you say that you're a community centralized brand, it's, we always say our immediate and extended communities. Immediate means our current members and our current customers and partners and things like that. And extended means whoever else that needs our support and help and service, and however we can empower and champion them. So, today, 3 years in, when I look at all the work that we've done, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of, is that I can say with 100% confidence that not only are we a community-centric brand, but we walk the walk absolutely when it comes to impact and support and kindness and inclusivity and, all of the above.
Yeah. And you mentioned again 3 years in. I just think that's amazing that it's, when you talk with you, when I was talking with you for our summits, it seems like you guys have been doing it forever. I mean, you really have it nailed down, and so, but 3 years. And as you said, maybe that was a time when you were kind of nervous, you were being told by friends and maybe not to do it, people you trusted. And here you are today. And it seems like you're really happy. And obviously you guys are doing so great. Talk about maybe that woman 3 years ago and today. Like, did you see this
Sure.
thing, or what were you expecting? Or do you look back and say, oh my gosh?
I think the woman 3 years ago, I was, honestly in a somewhat of a fragile place, right? Because you're questioning yourself, every day you're like, I left my career or my previous career. This is still my career, was this the right choice? Did I make the right decision to make the transition? And, support system, as we all know, is everything. And, I had some people who really supported my decision, but I also had a lot of people who didn't support the decision, right? So that dings at you a little bit more, actually. So, but the person today, every day, perspective is everything. And I think this past year has absolutely changed all of our lives, and it's changed all of our perspective on how we view life and our opportunities. And every day I'm really, really grateful that I was given the opportunities that I've been given at Visible, and I'm grateful for the colleagues that I work with. I work with some of the most brilliant people that I've ever met. And, it takes a certain type of mentality and drive to work in a startup environment, right? Like every day you're sort of, it's like, building blocks. So I'm really grateful for all of those things. I've learned more than I could have ever imagined. I've challenged myself more than I could have ever imagined. And all of those elements, I think, have sort of pushed me to be a lot stronger, to have an even wider and more diversified perspective. And, I feel good and thankful and very lucky.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't be going for your MBA if you had stayed where you were.
No,
And
no, yeah,
wouldn't be beaming with me.
exactly,
Right there. That makes it all worth it.
exactly.
So I want to ask you, do you have a guilty pleasure? Is there something that, you kind of do and you don't necessarily, you either, maybe you're sneaking ice cream or you're watching is there a show you might binge, or is there something that really is just for you?
Sure. Guilty pleasure for me, I love food. And I'm not even going to exclude one type of food over another. I love everything. When someone asks me, is there a type of food that you don't like? I've never been able to answer that question because I do truly love everything. And then when it comes to really indulging over the weekend, I love a great glass of wine. A lot of people do. So that's sort of like how I indulge, is a combination of those two things.
You have to have the chocolate with the wine too. For me,
That sounds really fabulous and amazing.
I need chocolate with the wine, red wine. All right, I want to ask you, is there something maybe, we talked about guilty pleasure. How about something that you do maybe on a daily basis that really makes you better at not just your job, but as a person, like just it sort of grounds you. This is something that you need to do each day.
The one thing that I try to do most days is that I block time for myself in the mornings just to give myself space to think. And I wasn't doing that before. A few years ago, I was sort of just always going, and without giving myself that sort of psychological and mental break. And I remember one day I was talking to another mentor of mine, and I was asking him questions because he's incredibly efficient and is always doing a lot and always has a full plate. And he was like, I was like, how do you do this? Do you meditate? What do you do? And he's like, no. And he pointed to the couch in his office, and he was like, I just block a couple of hours for myself every morning just to think. And he was like, that gives me a lot of peace of mind, and it allows me to plan my day, to strategize, to think through some of the decisions that I have to make with the team. And I started to do that when he told me, and I feel like it allowed me to become a lot more present and engaged, and also a lot more efficient and productive. And it's sort of my space to think through things and think through our strategies, some of my to-do list, things like that. And it's like the power of thinking, uninterrupted thinking. Yeah, it has huge value.
What I love about that too is it's not like, because you always hear people meditating, and I think it's great if you can. Whenever
Yes.
I try to meditate, things
Doesn't work
in my mind. Like, so you're saying think, which that I can do.
Yes.
Like I
Yes.
can't get it out of my mind. Like I'll be like,
Yes.
or I think, and I'm like, they think of a boring thing or whatever, and it's just
Yeah.
like, no, then something. I got to do this, and so. But I think that definitely makes much more sense, at least for me. So I think that's a great idea. But finally, the last question I want to ask you is, and it's sort of, it might not be even a right one for you because you did just switch over to Visible and from a different career, but is there moving on from now? If all of a sudden Visible was taken away from you, what would be the next phase? What would be the plan B? What would be where would you go? What would you do?
Hopefully Visible wouldn't go anywhere, but I always think over the years I've dabbled in a couple of startup initiatives, and one of them went really well, and the other one was put on hold. It would be, if I wasn't doing this, I would probably go back into that entrepreneurship, being a small business owner. You, you know, people who go for it and are fearless when it comes to those things are really, really inspiring to me. So I think if I wasn't doing this, I would explore something like that. Something that's still, because being at Visible, it's a very entrepreneurial space, right? So just like continuing on that path in some capacity.
Yeah, no, and that's why I said you guys have only been 3 years. It's not a jinx. It's not me. It's just more wondering, as far as if you had to leave the industry. But I see what you're saying in terms of just sticking with that entrepreneurial. I think
Yes.
it's very difficult for you at this point to go back to, say, a corporate, world again in that sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it sounds, at least from this conversation that I had with you. Well, Pearl, thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Thank you for watching and staying with us, and keep coming back. We're going to do this every week. And if you have someone, an amazing woman like Pearl, that you'd like for me to interview that's in marketing, please let me know and I'll see what I can do. Pearl, again, thank you. And, keep me posted on your MBA. So
Absolutely will do. Thank you so much for having me.
Motivated. I'm like, maybe I should start looking into that. So anyway,
Highly
thank
recommended.
you.
Thanks again.